As a leader and entrepreneur myself, and the CEO of a $500,000 organization, there are often things that have great impact on my life as a man. And I look for ways I can help give back to the people that I have encountered along the way. I am humbled to be talking to you about Jediael. This project he is working on has taken some time, but with very good reason, which I will address by the end of this forward. It has been my pleasure to know and mentor Jediael since 2016. I first met Jediael in a sales position working for DirecTV doing advertising marketing. However, as young and inexperienced as he was, even at the time we was working in direct sales, it was his determination and don't quit attitude and his pursuit to perfection made him stand out amongst his peers and made him a great asset to his team. In this book, you will read about procrastination and how it will affect your ability to be successful and how dealing with procrastination really dampens any fire that you might have burning to be successful. Procrastination is a double-edged sword. It can handicap your success, but it can also birth perfection, magnifying the anticipation and hunger for your work. Over the years, I have seen Jediael try quite a few different business ventures, whether it was being a personal trainer or whether it was teaching himself how to play music and master music as he rose from the ashes of defeat to become King AshBel and an amazing music producer. And although he has tried many different things in his life, now that he has found his niche and has found the keys to success, I pray that you are able to get from this book what he has intended for you to get. Because of his willingness to learn, I have witnessed his growth as a man and as an entrepreneur and as a human being. I am even more excited about this project that he has invited me to be a part of. Jediael is a man of deep thought and great integrity. His desire for knowledge and his don't quit attitude and determination makes him the ideal person to deliver this message. Being a self-taught musician and engineer gave him the discipline and experience needed to write this book. As for procrastination coming from Jediael, he is such a perfectionist that it has taken him this long to write this book because he wanted to make sure that it was perfect for his first project. We all know the old saying that good things come to those who wait. And we also know that patience is a virtue. So with all that being said, and without any further ado, I present to some and introduce to others Jediael King AshBel Lee, author, engineer, and music producer. Enjoy this book, and I hope that it blesses your soul.
My first book, My Getting Past Excuses and Ways to Overcome It. Introduction. Let me guess, you're the type of person who sincerely wants to become more productive and disciplined, exercise regularly, eat healthily, wake up early, and finish tasks and projects on time. But for whatever reason, you can't seem to make these things happen. You struggle to follow through on your goals by successfully putting your intentions into practice. Paradoxically, you're unable to force yourself to do the very things you're sure you want to do. For reasons you don't understand, certain activities feel too uncomfortable to pursue. Indeed, you shudder just thinking about them. And so, you end up wasting massive amounts of time watching TV, playing video games, dilly-dallying on social media, and otherwise distracting yourself. Then once you snap out of your distraction, you feel guilty about how you spent the last couple of hours. You respond by harshly criticizing yourself, which further adds to your misery and causes you to drown yourself in even more distractions. Does this sound anything like you? Good. You're in the right place. You're a procrastinator, and you're here because you're looking for a solution to end your struggles. You're here because procrastination is causing massive pain in your life and you've about had enough. Maybe it's the constant guilt that's suffocating you. Perhaps it's the building stress or anxiety. Perhaps it's the relentless self-criticism. Or maybe it's the never-ending background feelings of misery, disappointment, and unhappiness that are weighing you down. These sensations of shame, disappointment, and lack of fulfillment lead you to question whether you'll ever be pleased, especially since you know deep inside that you're wasting your potential day in and day out. The funny thing about procrastinators is that they know how capable they indeed are, even as they continue to struggle with transitioning from thinking to doing. You know what you got inside you. You know you could achieve incredible feats in life and make big things happen. Armed with this self-knowledge and insight, the fact that you can't seem to make those positive changes detracts from your happiness. Consequently, the procrastinator's life tends to be characterized by missed opportunities, wasted potential, fear, shame, guilt, and disappointment. And if you think things are bad now, consider all your future regrets of not living up to your potential. You're likely to experience significant pain that won't dissipate until you get a handle on the situation. Procrastination is sometimes called the thief of time, but it's much more than that, isn't it? Not only is it the thief of time, but it's also the perpetuator of evil, the killer of dreams, and the creator of endless problems. And if you're reading this book, you probably already know that. You're perfectly familiar with all the negative consequences of procrastination. If procrastination is such a painful condition, why don't we stop doing it? Why can't we just do the things we know we need to get done? Why do we keep delaying action? And what can we do to break free of procrastination's grip and finally get some real work done? If you're interested in the answers to these questions, you're probably in a similar situation to the one in which I spent most of my life. Up until about a year ago, I was the worst procrastinator imaginable. I had zero self-discipline. I couldn't get anything done without being subjected to significant outside pressure. And I was suffering the consequences of living as a procrastinator. Since that time, I've gone through a remarkable transformation, which I'm going to use to teach you with specific tools and tactics you can use to overcome your tendency to procrastinate finally. This book presents a concise yet detailed summary of the key lessons I've learned fighting my own battles against procrastination over the last year. You're going to know precisely how procrastination works, why you do it, and why you can't seem to stop. Most importantly, you're going to discover the most potent tools to stop delaying and start getting things done. These strategies will work for you, whether you're a failing student, a successful business person, a stay-at-home mom, an inspiring entrepreneur, or a lost cause with little hope of improvement. What is procrastination? The first question is the easiest to answer, so we won't spend a lot of time with it. Procrastination is the act of delaying or putting off something that should be done. The crucial ingredient in procrastination is that the delay is irrational. We know waiting for a specific task isn't good for us, but we do it anyway. The most complex question to answer is why we do it. Why do we put off doing something that will be in our best interest? Why do we put off exercising when it's good for us? Why do we delay studying when it's obviously what we should be doing? Some researchers define procrastination as a form of self-regulated failure, characterized by the irrational delay of tasks despite potentially negative consequences. So no matter how well organized and committed you are, you've probably still found yourself frittering away hours on trivial pursuits. Watching TV, updating your Facebook status, shopping online, when you should have been spending that time on work or something to better yourself. Whether you're putting off finishing a project for work, avoiding homework assignments, or ignoring household chores, procrastination can have a significant impact on your job, your grades, and most importantly, your life. Dreadful effects of procrastination that can destroy your life. The adverse effects of procrastination can range from simply missing a deadline on an essential task to doing something more long-term, such as missing an opportunity that kills a dream. Some of us might be lucky enough to identify a tendency to procrastinate in time and still do something about it. For others, it can have long-lasting effects that resonate throughout our lives. The reason we procrastinate varies from person to person and is not always obvious. Sometimes, it's a hidden fear that we don't want to acknowledge. Or it could be as simple as not wanting to do something because it doesn't motivate us. Whatever the reason may be, if you know you're a procrastinator, you should be very careful, as it has far more damaging effects than you may realize. Here are 8 most common effects of procrastination that can destroy not only your productivity, but your life. 1. Losing precious time. How much time have you wasted procrastinating? The worst thing about procrastinating is when you realize that you are 2, 5, or 10 years older and nothing has changed. This is a terrible feeling because you can't turn back the hands of time. You just have to live with the helpless feeling of regret. And there is nothing worse than feeling frustrated at yourself, knowing the situation could have been so different if only you had taken that first step. 2. Blowing opportunities. How many opportunities have you wasted because you didn't take advantage of them? This is when the effects of procrastination make you want to kick yourself. What you don't realize is that the opportunity could have been life-changing, but you missed out on it. Most opportunities only come around once. You are never guaranteed a second chance. Opportunities are the world's way of giving you more. So do yourself a favor and grab them with both hands as soon as they present themselves. 3. Not meeting goals. Procrastination seems to come on with full force when we entertain the thought of goals. Wanting to achieve or change something, you might have a strong desire to change, but you just can't seem to take the first step forward. You might find yourself thinking, why is it so hard to go for something that I want so badly? Only you can answer that. You'll have to explore a little deeper into the resistance. We set goals because we have a deep desire to better our lives in some way. If you don't do this because of procrastination, you reduce the possibility to better your life. Uncover the root cause behind your procrastination if it's preventing you from achieving your goals, or you may never attain them. 4. Ruining a career. The way you work directly affects your results, how much you achieve, and how well you perform. So the effects of procrastination can end up being detrimental to your career. Procrastination may prevent you from meeting deadlines or achieving your monthly targets. What consequence will this eventually have on your career? You might miss out on promotions or even be at risk of losing your job. You can try to hide it for a while, but don't doubt that long-term procrastination at work will almost certainly ruin your career. 5. Lower self-esteem. Let's start this one off with a quote. A broken mirror doesn't make your reflection ugly. That quote was from the not-so-honorable Kyng AshBel. See what I did there? This is one of the vicious cycles you might find yourself in. We tend to procrastinate because low self-esteem makes us feel that we won't get a task or project done the right way. Unfortunately, procrastinating only increases feelings of low self-esteem, making us doubt ourselves even more. When we have low self-esteem, we hold ourselves back. We can even feel unworthy of success and begin to self-sabotage. Procrastination eats away at your confidence, slowly but surely. If this resonates with you, like it has in my life, start to focus on building your self-esteem instead of holding on to the illusion that you should do something, as low self-esteem can force you into doing some things when you are clearly not ready. 6. Making poor decisions. Poor decision-making is one of the worst effects of procrastination. When you procrastinate, you make decisions based on criteria that most likely wouldn't be there if you didn't procrastinate, like the pressure to decide on something because time is running short. Whether you think you're emotional or not, emotions heavily influence our decisions, and procrastination increases negative emotions, which can push us into making decisions that don't serve us in the long run. Instead of rushing through decisions while procrastinating, Write out all the possibilities and find a calm moment to analyze the pros and cons of each. Now to my favorite number, 7. Damage to your reputation. When you keep saying you will do something and don't, your reputation gets tarnished, as nobody wants empty promises. Besides damaging your reputation, you are hurting your self-esteem and self-confidence. You will also find that it gets easier to procrastinate each time because you don't surprise yourself anymore. People stop depending on you and hold back on offering you opportunities because they feel like you'll just procrastinate or not show up. Even if you have a reputation of being a procrastinator, you can still turn it around. Next time someone asks you for something, use all of the tools at your disposal to get it done on time. Each time you fulfill a request, your reputation begins to build back up, which will lead to more opportunities and better relationships with those around you. 8. Risking your health. Among the effects of procrastination are mental health problems like stress and anxiety. If your procrastination leads to feelings of depression, this will start to affect other areas of your life. If you procrastinate too much with something, it will most likely start to stress you out and cause anxiety, especially when other people or things are involved. And all this can lead to poor health outcomes. Another way that procrastination can affect your health in the short term is when you continually put off checkups and postpone appointments or things you need to do, such as exercise. The problem only gets worse, and the consequences are dire. In a study on procrastination interventions, researchers discovered that cognitive behavioral therapy significantly reduced procrastination. If you find yourself continuing to struggle with procrastination, cognitive behavioral therapy may be a great option to try. Why people procrastinate? People often assume that procrastination is simply a matter of willpower, but the solution is far more complex than that in reality. When faced with a decision to make or a task to complete, we usually rely on our self-control to push ourselves to get things done. Furthermore, our motivation, based on the expectation of receiving some reward for our efforts, can support our self-control and make it more likely that we will get things done promptly. However, there are also various demotivating factors that we can experience, which have an opposite effect than our motivation, making us more likely to procrastinate. For example, anxiety, fear of failure, and other negative emotions can cause us to delay unnecessarily, and eventually, we end up seeing the task as unpleasant altogether. Furthermore, some hindering factors intervene with our self-control and motivation. For example, exhaustion, which occurs due to having to work hard all day, and that in itself can make it more difficult for us to exert self-control. Similarly, a large gap between the time when we complete a task and the time at which we expect to receive a reward for completing it can cause us to discount the value of this reward, which means that its motivational value will be significantly reduced. As long as our self-control and motivation outweigh the effects of all the demotivating factors, despite the hindering factors that interfere with them, we manage to get our work done promptly. However, when all the negative aspects outweigh our self-control and motivation, we end up procrastinating by putting off our work either indefinitely or until some future point when the balance shifts in our favor. Overall, we procrastinate because our self-control and motivation, which might be hindered by exhaustion and rewards that are far in the future, are outweighed by demotivating factors such as anxiety, fear of failure, or anything that was mentioned at an earlier point in this book. All this causes us to fail to self-regulate our behavior, and in turn, we continue to postpone things unnecessarily, even when we know that we should be doing them. Which is why procrastination often leads to a gap between how we intend to act and how we work in reality. Note, there are some exceptions to this in cases where procrastination is driven by other factors, such as rebelliousness or the desire to add excitement to otherwise dull work. For the most part, the mechanism outlined above is the main one that explains why people procrastinate instead of getting shit done. Reasons for procrastination. This section contains a comprehensive list of the specific reasons people procrastinate, based primarily on the psychological mechanism outlined in the previous chapter. If you're sitting wondering, Why hasn't he went through the solutions yet? Just hold your horses. And if you're wondering why you procrastinate, look through this list and try to figure out which of these causes of procrastination apply to you. And try to be reflective and honest with yourself. This is not a horoscope, prophecy, palm reading, or tarot card reading. So understand, not everything here will apply to you. So feel free to skim through the list and read primarily about reasons that you think you could be dealing with procrastination. Now let's get to it. Abstract goals. People are more likely to procrastinate when their goals are vague or abstract compared to when their goals are concrete and clearly defined. For example, goals such as get fit or start exercising are relatively vague and will most likely lead to procrastination. Conversely, a goal such as go to the gym on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right after work, and spend at least 30 minutes on a treadmill running at high speed. You sound like your own personal trainer, which is therefore more likely to lead you to take action. Furthermore, note that other factors can make a goal feel abstract. According to a construal level theory, goals perceived as highly improbable are also relatively abstract. This means that if a person finds it unlikely to attain a specific purpose, this can cause them to view that goal as abstract, which can increase the likelihood that they will procrastinate on it. Rewards that are far in the future. People often procrastinate on tasks associated with rewards that they will only receive a while after completing the task, since people tend to discount the value of tips that are far in the future, a phenomenon known as temporal discounting or delay discounting. Accordingly, people often display a present bias when they choose to engage in activities that reward them in the short term, at the expense of working on tasks that will lead to better outcomes for them in the long term. Note that in the relationship between the time that it takes to receive a reward and the perceived value is usually inconsistent. As the rate of discounting decreases over time, essentially, this means the further into the future a bonus is, the less the increase in time matters. While there is a big difference in how we value a reward that we can receive now compared to a bonus we can receive in a week, there is a much smaller difference in how we love a tip we can receive in a year compared to a reward we can receive in a year plus a week. Similarly, while there is a big difference between receiving compensation in a day and a year, there is a minor difference between receiving a prize in a year and receiving it in 2 years. This phenomenon is called hyperbolic discounting and is contrasted with exponential discounting, a time-consistent model of temporal discounting, where an increased delay before receiving a reward always has the same effect on its perceived value, regardless of how far in the future it is. Finally, note that the same concept can also apply to punishments in addition to rewards. Essentially, this means that the further in the future a potential sentence is, the less it motivates people to take action. A disconnect from our future self. People sometimes procrastinate because they view their future self as disconnected from their present self. Someone might delay when it comes to eating healthy, even if the doctor told them that it's essential, because the harmful impact of their present diet will only start being a serious problem in a couple years, which they view as someone else's problem, i.e., as the problem of their future self. The disconnect between the present and future selves can cause people to procrastinate in a variety of ways. For example, it can cause them to think that their present self shouldn't have to worry about the future, since their future self will have to handle any task that they postpone or deal with any consequences for failing to complete those tasks on time. Similarly, it can cause them to think that their present self shouldn't have to bother with getting things done now if their future self will be the one who reaps the rewards of their actions. A focus on future options. People sometimes avoid taking action in the present because they intend or hope to pursue a more attractive course of action in the future. This mindset can lead to long-term procrastination and persists even when the person who is procrastinating never ends up following through on their intended plan, even though starting now will still be beneficial and wouldn't prevent them from switching to a more severe exercise plan in the future. Optimism about the future. This optimism can pertain to two main things: the amount of time available to complete the study, or to the person's inherent ability to complete the job. For example, a student might decide to postpone getting started on an assignment that is due a few weeks from now because they feel like there will be plenty of time to get it done later. In many cases, this form of optimism might occur as a result of underestimating the time that it will take to complete the task in question. This is known as the planning fallacy, and it can lead both procrastinators as well as non-procrastinators to assume that they will finish upcoming tasks earlier than they actually will. Similarly, a person might decide after struggling to get started on a task to postpone it to the next day because they believe that tomorrow they will be able to bring themselves to work on it. In most cases, this form of optimism involves an overestimation of future abilities. And it's important to know that people prone to procrastination often promise to themselves that things will be different next time. Indecisiveness. People sometimes procrastinate because they are unable to make decisions promptly. This can be an issue in various ways, such as when a person can't decide which course of action to engage in, or when they need to make a confident decision before moving ahead with their general plan of action. A person might delay starting to diet because they can't decide which diet plan to follow. Similarly, a handsome dark brother might wait to get started on his book. Various factors generally make it more likely that someone will get stuck overthinking the situation while trying to make a decision. This is sometimes referred to as analysis paralysis or choice paralysis. The main factors to consider from a practical perspective are the following. The more options you have, the harder it'll be for you to choose. Essentially, the more choices you have to choose from, the harder it'll be for you to evaluate them and decide which one is preferable. The more similar your options are to one another, the harder it'll be for you to choose. So what are you saying? I'm saying that the more similar the available options are, and the closer they are in value, the harder it'll be for you to decide which one is better. Especially when there isn't a single option available that is preferable to the others. In addition, it's essential to keep in mind that each time you have to make a decision, you end up depleting your mental resources to some degree, especially if you are prone to indecisiveness. Accordingly, the more decisions that you have to make during a certain period of time, the more you deplete your capacity for self-control, and the more likely you are to procrastinate in making future decisions, at least until you have the chance to recharge yourself mentally. Feeling overwhelmed. People sometimes procrastinate because they feel overwhelmed about the task that they need to handle. This overwhelming feeling can come from various reasons, such as having a single study that feels huge in terms of scope, or having a large number of small jobs that adds up. When this happens, a person might decide to avoid the functions in question or attempt to handle them, but then feel paralyzed before those tasks are completed. If you need to clean up your entire house, the fact that the task will take so long and involve so many parts might have you feel overwhelmed. And in turn, you might avoid any mop, broom, glove, Mr. Clean sponge, or anything you might use to clean your house that day, like it was COVID-19 itself. Anxiety. People sometimes procrastinate because they feel anxious about a task that they need to handle. Someone who feels anxious about paying their bills might repeatedly delay doing so, even though this avoidance doesn't make the problem disappear. This issue can be especially problematic in cases where a person's anxiety increases as a result of their procrastination, which can lead to a feedback loop where someone feels anxious about a specific task, which causes them to procrastinate instead of doing it, which makes them even more nervous, which in turn causes them to procrastinate even further. Task aversion. People often procrastinate because they are opposed to the task that they need to perform. If you need to make an important phone call to someone you dislike, you might procrastinate instead of just getting it done because you don't want to talk to them. This occurs because the more people find a specific task unappealing, the more they want to avoid it, and therefore, the more likely they are to procrastinate on it. A person might procrastinate because they perceive a task as frustrating, tedious, or boring. Or they just might procrastinate because they believe that there is a gap between the difficulty of the job and their own competence, which means that they feel like the task is too difficult for them to handle in the first place, which is a good segue into the next bullet. Perfectionism. People sometimes procrastinate as a result of their perfectionism. You ever heard of the story, The Tortoise and the Hare? Perfectionism can lead to procrastination in several ways, such as making someone so afraid of making a mistake that they end up not doing or taking any action at all, or by causing someone to be so worried about publishing something, like a book. While it's reasonable to want to create and publish high-quality work, the problem starts when perfectionists aim for the unattainable flawlessness that exists only in their mind, and that causes them to procrastinate even more by giving them seemingly valid excuses for unnecessary delays. Note that perfection doesn't always lead to procrastination. There are even situations where perfectionism can make them less likely to procrastinate by pushing them to do a good job and complete their task promptly. As such, perfectionism isn't always a negative thing and can only lead to problems and issues when it causes people to unnecessarily delay things because they're overly worried about their work not being flawless. Fear of evaluation or negative feedback. People sometimes procrastinate because they are afraid of being evaluated or because they're so scared of receiving negative feedback from others. People's fear of this negative feedback is usually exaggerated, and the consequences of that feedback are never as significant as they feel it will be. But as I always say, the best things about situations can be the worst things about situations, and the worst things can be the best things. Fear of evaluation or negative feedback can also make people less likely to procrastinate by motivating them to get the work done promptly. Whether the influence of this fear is positive or negative depends on a variety of factors, such as how anxious a person is about the upcoming evaluation or how confident they are in their ability to handle the task at hand successfully. Fear of failure. People often procrastinate because they are afraid of failing at the task they need to complete. This fear of failure can promote procrastination in various ways, such as causing people to avoid finishing a job or start a job and allow the nature of hard work to cause them to procrastinate. How afraid someone is of failing is generally related to how important the task is. More important tasks are often associated with higher levels of procrastination in cases where fear of failure is the driving cause behind a person's procrastination. Fear of failure is a severe issue among those who suffer from high levels of self-doubt, particularly those prone to having a negative, irrational belief about their own abilities. Keep in mind that fear of failure, perfectionism, and negative feedback are all strongly related. One doesn't necessitate the others, and any combination of these factors might influence a person. For example, someone might be confident in their ability to perform a task, but still worried about negative feedback from others. That fear can also go as far as to have them worried about failing something, even if no one else will even know about it, which leads me to my next point. Self-handicapping. Nothing gives you the attention like always playing the victim. That's not a quote, but it might as well be. Remember earlier when I mentioned low self-esteem and self-doubt? Well, these things and a variety of others can be a form of self-handicapping. People sometimes procrastinate as a way of placing barriers in their own way. So if they fail, their failures could be attributed to their procrastination rather than their own abilities. Now let me throw another example in here. A student might procrastinate instead of studying for a test. They prefer knowing that they failed due to their procrastination instead of failing because they couldn't understand the material well. As a result of this defense mechanism, certain procrastinators spend more time procrastinating if they believe that they are likely to fail when it comes to the task at hand, especially if they feel that the failure will reflect poorly on them. Self-sabotage. People sometimes procrastinate due to their tendency to engage in self-defeating behaviors, which means they actively sabotage their progress. There are various reasons why people engage in self-sabotage. Individuals who procrastinate for this reason tend to also engage in other types of related behaviors, such as pushing people away who treat them well, which I know all too well myself. A perceived lack of control. People sometimes procrastinate because they feel incapable of controlling the outcome of events in their lives. A person might delay getting started on an assignment at work if they feel that their boss will criticize it, regardless of how much effort they put into it. I've had homies that tell me, "You can't control everything. Chill out. You still young anyway." Though this perceived lack of control can play a role in specific isolated cases, some people are more predisposed to feeling a general lack of control than others. I'm not going to take too much time to talk about this topic to you because I myself still struggle with this. So if you know me personally or you see me out somewhere and have listened or read this book and you have some answers, some tips, some gems or wisdom about fighting the need to be in control, tell me, my guy, because your boy sure could use them. And it's also one of the reasons it took me so long to write this damn book, because I needed to feel like I had all control before I released the book. But as we all know, there's no such thing. Sure, there are times that are better than others, but the perfect time, like the one that exists in our mind, rarely ever comes into our realities, at least not in the way that we see in our heads. But anyway, let's move on. Depression. Some people procrastinate because they suffer from underlying depression, believe it or not. This is because depression can lead to fatigue, difficulty in concentrating, and a reduced interest in activities. Someone who is depressed might repeatedly postpone cleaning their room or going out to get groceries because they don't even have the mental energy to do any of that. Lack of motivation. People often procrastinate because they are not motivated enough to work on a given task. A student might procrastinate while studying for a test in a subject that isn't relevant to their major because they don't care for getting a good grade on it. I feel that. This is often an issue when the primary motivation for performing a task is extrinsic, as in the case of someone who is pressured by their parents to do well in school or in life, rather than intrinsic, as in the case of someone who simply wants to feel that they've successfully learned some material. Accordingly, when people are driven to complete a specific task by an external source of motivation, they generally display higher levels of procrastination than that when they are driven by internal or an autonomous source of inspiration. A final note, that different people have different levels of general achievement motivation, which means that some people are more driven and motivated than others to pursue their goals in life. Accordingly, those who have lower levels of achievement motivation are more likely to procrastinate on various tasks. Laziness. Whether you want to accept it or not, a lot of people are just lazy as fuck. Laziness reflects a person's inherent unwillingness to put in the effort needed to achieve their goals, even when they can do so. In some cases, a person's laziness can be one of the driving forces behind their procrastination. However, know that in some situations, people might assume that someone else's procrastination is driven by laziness, but in reality, it's occurring due to some underlying reason, like anxiety, fear of failure, or they just going through some shit mentally. Mental health is an issue, you know. Another point, although laziness and lack of motivation appear similar, they are two separate issues. It's possible to be highly motivated to pursue a goal, but at the same time not make any progress towards the goal because you're unwilling to put any effort necessary for the work. You're motivated, you're just lazy as fuck. Prioritization of a short-term mood. To my queens, to my sisters, to my ladies, to my women, to my girls, to my females, not taking shots, but just hear me out. People often procrastinate because they prioritize their feelings in the present and do things that'll help them feel better right now, even if it comes at the expense of taking action that aligns with their long-term goals. This is known as short-term mood repair, or maybe I just made that up. Who knows? Essentially, this form of procrastination, which is sometimes referred to as indulgent delay, or maybe I made that one up too, occurs when people give in to their desire for instant gratification and engage in satisfying behaviors in the short term, instead of working on the tasks that will benefit them more long term. Ladies, I know you know men that have some of these same issues, but look, when it comes to anything moody, that's a crown that y'all have and will always have until the ends of time. Also, This kind of behavior reflects the concept of the pleasure principle, which is the tendency to seek out pleasurable activities and avoid unpleasant ones. Intuition. While this tendency is natural and intuitive, it becomes a severe issue when unable to control it. It causes someone to continuously pursue short-term gratification at the expense of long-term achievement and development. Now that we got the sisters out the way, let's talk to the brothers, the men, the boys, the dudes, the guys, Low capacity for self-control. What is self-control, my brother? Well, let me put on my honorable glasses and give y'all the gospel. Self-control reflects a person's ability to self-regulate their behavior, to bring themselves to follow through on their intentions, and to take some action on things that are in their best interests, particularly in the long term. A lack of self-control makes people more likely to procrastinate. Obviously, that's not surprising, is it? Given that self-control is crucial for allowing people to self-regulate their behavior. Now listen here, my brothers, because I'm still on the pulpit. In a lot of cases, insufficient self-control can lead us to engage in activities that are easy and accessible, like warming up a thigh pocket. Even if they're not inherently appealing, instead of working on tasks that are more inherently appealing, but will necessitate more effort, like them queens. And I know this not a relationship book, and I'm not trying to talk to you about how you should do your business, bruh. But a lot of us do things, and we don't see how it's affecting other parts of our lives. So the fact that we enjoy procrastination enough to continue doing it, it starts to seep in our approach to other things, like our approach to women. Due to the lack of self-control, we continue to encourage in ourselves. I'd be wrong if I didn't tell you the truth, bruh. This next one is another one that I know all too well. Impulsivity. Impulsivity is the tendency to act on a whim without planning or considering the consequences of your actions. Impulsivity is strongly associated with the tendency to procrastinate, since the decision to procrastinate is often impulsive, such as when people ignore the long-term consequences of their actions or when they fail to plan their work ahead of time. An impulsive person might end up procrastinating on an assignment that they're currently working on by suddenly deciding to go out with friends, even though the project is due soon. And I say the best for last, rebellion. Sometimes people procrastinate as an act of just straight up rebellion, generally against an authority figure by postponing a task that they resent being given in the first place. I ain't even gotta give you no examples. I know most of y'all listening probably hard-headed anyway. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Tips for overcoming procrastination. Procrastination is one of those things that even the most well-organized and punctual fall victim to at some point or another. Think about the last time you found yourself watching television or scrolling Instagram when you really should have been doing something else. While familiar, procrastination can have a detrimental impact on your life, including your grades, your relationship, but you know. So what can people do to overcome procrastination and avoid the stress, anxiety, and poor performance that stems from completing assignments at the last minute? Researchers suggest that developing a schedule, carefully planning academic tasks, and improving time management skills are an effective way to cope with procrastination. But you knew that already, so let's go a little bit deeper. 1. Deal with your fears. Fear is one factor that contributes to procrastination. This can involve fear of failure, making mistakes, or this fear of success that we all have. If you're afraid of success because you secretly believe that you don't deserve it, it's essential to realize that your self-handicapping might keep you from achieving your goals in the future. By addressing the fear that keeps you from getting started, you can overcome your procrastination habit sooner. 2. Make a list. This millionaire once told me, the thickest ink lasts longer than the sharpest mind. Was he right? Shit, I don't know. But I guarantee your pen does. Start by creating a list with some things that you'd like to accomplish. If necessary, put a date next to them so you'll know that there's a deadline you need to reach. Estimate how long each task will take to complete. Then double that number so you don't fall into the cognitive trap of underestimating how long each project will take. 3. Break projects down into more manageable segments. When faced with a big project, you might feel daunted, intimidated, or even hopeless when you look at the sheer amount of work involved. At this point, take individual items on your list and break them down into a series of steps. If you need to write a paper for a class, what steps do you need to follow? If you're planning a big family event or a wedding, what are the things you need to do? What are the supplies you need to have? Once again, the thickest ink lasts longer than the sharpest mind, from what I was told. Me, myself, personally, I enjoy putting stuff in my phone or on these devices that I have. But to each his own. Number 4, recognize the onset of procrastination. As you start to tackle items on your list, notice when thoughts of procrastination starts to creep in your mind. If you find yourself thinking, I don't feel like doing this right now, or I have to work on this later, clamp down on those thoughts because you're recognizing that you're about to procrastinate. Number 5, eliminate distractions. It can be almost impossible to get any real work done when you're turning your attention to what's on television, what your girlfriend or boyfriend's doing, or when you keep checking your friend's Facebook status updates. Assign yourself a period during which you could turn off all these distractions. Tell your homeboys, I'm not gonna be able to meet you this Sunday or the next few Sundays. Dial back on some of that social media time that you be using and use that time to focus all your attention on the task at hand. 6, an important one, reward yourself. Once you've completed a task or even a tiny portion of an excessive study, it's essential to reward yourself for your efforts. Allow yourself to indulge in something that you might find fun and enjoyable. Whether it's attending a sporting event, playing a video game, hitting your girl up, going to her crib, sitting up under her wing, watching your favorite TV shows, looking at some pictures on your social media site, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Erykah Badu style. Number 7, my favorite number and the number of completion. Final thoughts. Breaking the procrastination habit is not easy. I'm still struggling with it even while writing this book. After all, if it was simple, there wouldn't be an estimated 80 to 95% of students engaging in procrastination regularly. I believe the urge to put things off is in every one of us. But those that are of high performance deny themselves that as they learn, unlearn, and relearn strategies that help them stay in pocket. While procrastination might not be something you can avoid entirely, becoming aware of why you procrastinate and how to overcome those tendencies can help you a lot. By implementing these strategies, you might find that it's a little bit easier to put your nose to the grind and get started on those critical tasks, like writing your first book. Peace, and thank you for your time.